I'm in Sturgis, Michigan, and the Sturgis Historical Society is putting on another historic walking tour. Now, cemeteries themselves are outdoor museums, and great historical societies like the one here in Sturgis put on wonderful programs annually to share some of the history in these great outdoor museums. And so I'm going to leave it to them to tell you some of that story today. So come along and join me. This is future Michael here, reaching out to you after I recorded this video originally. I was about 5 to 10 minutes late in arriving for the cemetery tour. This was due to traffic and unexpected construction that I ran into on my way there. One of the members of the Historical Society was kind enough to record the first 2 to 3 minutes of the very first presentation with her camera on video so that we were able to capture it. However, I just wanted to point out she didn't have a tripod, nor did she have a wind dampening device on her microphone. So please be patient with the first few minutes of the recording. I just wanted to point that out because the image stabilization and sound definitely improves after about 2.5 minutes into the first presentation.
As a student, I devoted my dance life, and I danced on TV. I danced for seriously at the Chicago Institute for Ballet, and I danced even for the governor of Kentucky. Now, the feat of dancing and the accomplishment there was while I was dancing, I broke one of my toe shoe ribbons. But I made it through the dance without anybody knowing that that toe shoe ribbon was ripped. It was one of the things that I wanted to instill in my students also. I wanted to teach them grace and poise and how to present themselves on stage with confidence. And to have confidence is when you go through a ballet with a shoe that came off or something ripped. It's always an accomplishment. I was very proud of my students. My mother was an accomplished ballerina, and when I was 11 years old in 1946, she started the La Ballerina L'École, which is a school for ballerinas. And of course, a lot of people know that ballet is taught with French. Everything was expressed in French. All the positions, all the poses, all the leaps and bounds are all in French. My students, I wanted them to learn things right, and my expectation was that they learned to dance and do it right. But I wanted them to learn to do it right in their lives too. And when I took out this cane, they knew that they'd get a little pat here or a little tuck here, but I wanted them to learn it right. The school where my mother started in 1946 was in our living room at the rectory of Howe Military. My father was the rector, and he would play the piano for all of my classes, all of the rehearsals, and all of the performances. And when we came up to Sturgis Auditorium, he would play on the big black grand piano that they still have up there on the stage. My mother's dream was to have a ballet school that continued to grow and flourish and teach young women and some boys all of the things that I just mentioned. And it did, and when she retired, I took the school over, and for another 40 years, I continued to teach ballet. It wasn't always easy to find partners, and in the early years, I liked to dance with my students, perform with my students. So I had a student, older brother, that got a hold of me because he had damaged his knee while he was playing football. And he had heard that it might be good to take some ballet and rehabilitate his school. So he was my partner for about 5 years, and then he went on to play football for Vanderbilt University. My father was an accomplished pianist, and as I mentioned, he played the piano for all of our ballets until we went to records and CDs. But that was when he retired. So he played the piano for a long time for us. My life partner, I married in 1962, Joseph Parker, and he was a beloved 6th grade teacher in the Sturgis schools. I see somebody nodding their head. Did you have him?
Yes.
Oh, that's lovely. He was my partner in all ways. He was my partner when I needed to have somebody hang heavy canvas backdrops. He would go get them, and he would take them back, and he would hang them and make sure that they were right. He was my partner when we needed something technical, like I wanted it to snow on stage during the Nutcracker Suite. And sometimes some of those things didn't always work out, but he was always trying to figure out the best way to make things work. One time we had a blizzard on stage because when he shook the sheet that had the snow in it, everything came down in one big kerplunk. And so we had to stop the ballet and sweep the stage. And of course, Joe was the one out there sweeping the stage, but the show did go on. He was my partner when he was a light man and made sure that the spotlight was where that it needed to be for whatever ballerina. He was my partner when I taught ballroom dancing. He was a very good dancer, and we always looked great together, and that brought people in because they all wanted to learn to dance like we did. I taught I taught ballroom dancing for many years at Sturgis Auditorium, and I also taught it at Howe Military School for the cadets. In those days, there weren't any girls around, so a lot of my students volunteered to go down and learn ballroom dancing with the cadets. It was always a guaranteed invite to a dance, I'm sure. We had 2 children, Elizabeth and Christopher. They made their ballet debut in diapers. They were adorable, and they continued to be in my ballets all the way through high school. One of the nicest compliments that I ever had was in the Sturgis Journal. One of their journalists wrote, "If you've never seen a Madeleine Murphy ballet, then you're in for a big surprise. It is not just a recital. It is a very professional, full stage production." And it was. We put on Nutcracker Suite many times. We put on Swan Lake many times. We danced Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Wizard of Oz. They were full productions, ballet productions. All of the proceeds from my productions went to charities. So I gave to the Polio Foundation, I gave to March of Dimes, United Way. In Sturgis, I gave to the hospital and to the Sturgis Auditorium and the Rescue Squad. But my favorite and most beloved charity was Pet Haven. I loved animals, and I believed in the well-being of animals and even the ones in need. And so for about the last 15 years, Pet Haven was the recipient of our proceeds. It pleases me so much when someone talks about the ballet teacher that many people will say, "Oh, do you mean Miss Madeleine?" Because that's what I was known to my students. Thank you very much for coming. Whoops.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the applause. I appreciate that.
Hello, Bud Munson here. Most people either call me Coach or Bud, and you can do the same. Now, I was born July 4th, 1936, to Paul and Dorothy Munson in Constantine, Michigan. Now, I don't know if any of you were paying attention there, but July 4th just happens to be a pretty big day here in the United States. And my parents, Paul and Dorothy Munson, couldn't be more proud than to have a firecracker baby in their family. And they made a big deal about my holiday birthday, and that's a tradition I carried on into my adult life by hosting big patriotic bar parties over on Klinger Lake with live music and food, and we would have most people would stay on and watch the fireworks afterwards. Now, sorry, I do this every tour. I get ahead of myself. Now, so I grew up playing sports most of my life. And let me tell you, this is just a little secret between you and me. I was always the smartest kid in the team. Just ask me, I know. So I ended up graduating from Constantine Public Schools in 1954, and then went on to Michigan State University and the Western Michigan University. I then came back to Constantine Public Schools and taught there as a teacher business and served as their athletic director. I also coached baseball and basketball there with winning teams in baseball. Then, in the late 1960s, I was hired here in Sturgis to come and work, and I became a guidance counselor. Now, during the summertime, I also taught driver's education. Now, some of you here may be some of my former students. You don't have to say, just, but yes, I taught driver's training. I also ended up coaching as well. Baseball, basketball, football, you name it. I've coached it one time or another, and of course, tennis. Now, when we first moved here, we moved over on Michigan Avenue, and we lived right by those tennis courts. They, at that time, were called Harmon Field. Hammond Field. Let me remind you, Harmon Field. And now, personally, I was not a tennis player growing up, but that ends up being my legacy here in Sturgis. Now, if I was into something, I was all in. So let me tell you, I was dedicated. And when it came to sports, I was dedicated. I was all in. Now, I cheered for all Michigan college sports. Of course, I cheered for the Constantine Falcons. And if I didn't have to be dressed up, I'd usually be wearing a Sturgis Trojan t-shirt, sweatshirt, or at least a ball cap. Now, my own kids, Mike, Mark, and Mary, all took tennis lessons from the great Harley Pierce, right over here, because we lived on Michigan Avenue. We were right by those tennis courts, and so now Harley was an amazing coach, and he laid the foundation down to an amazing boys tennis program here in Sturgis. And I started coaching my kids just by feeding them balls back and forth, on those tennis courts. That's how it started. And later, I decided that, Sturgis is missing something. It does not have a girls' tennis team. So I decided to start the Sturgis Trojans girls' tennis program. And for 27 years, I led that team. And we had, over that course of years, we won 311 matches to 15 losses. Now, later on this tour, you're going to meet a teacher by the name of Mr. Snow over there, and he's going to talk to you about percentages. So you can ask him, well, what percentage is that, Mr. Snow? Well, let me tell you, it's a plus 95% average coaching win percentage. And I don't know any coach out there that wouldn't love to have that kind of a win percentage. That's pretty impressive if you ask me. Now, through those 27 years, we won the Twin Valley Championship 26 times. We also, 16 times were regional champions, 3 times state runner-up champions. Now, I also had a student come by, a former player come by yesterday, and she just reminded me, she said, well, Mr. Munson, you're forgetting something here. And I said, what's that? Those 3 teams you lost to were all private schools. So technically, you are the state champion because we're a public school. So as far as she was concerned, she said, we are the state champion. And I cannot disagree. My kids were always champions. Now, I also coached the boys tennis team for 3 years. And we won 85 matches to 16 losses. Now, I also knew that my kids, if they were going to be great at playing tennis, they had to play year-round. So if it wasn't during the season, I had them playing either in Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, or Elkhart, wherever we could find a tennis program. I also knew that they had to get there somehow, so I started driving a school bus. Now, don't know any of you here who've had teenagers growing up, but teenagers, you might know that when they go and play at these matches, get a little hungry on the way home. And I said, well, Mr. Munson, aren't we going to stop for food somewhere? And I said, well, of course we'll stop for food, but it has to be a place where the driver eats for free. And that was the deal. So, McDonald's. That's where we would eat because the driver ate for free. So I drove school bus for years, as you can tell, and as you probably have already figured out, I stayed on at Sturgis Public Schools for decades. It was my goal to be the longest serving person here in Sturgis. Perhaps I succeeded. Of course, I loved driving school bus, and I loved being a guidance counselor. And every one of those things meant the world to me, but my first love was always coaching. And over the years, I've earned many awards. And I couldn't be prouder than any, every one of them meant the world to me. So in 1980, the Twin Valley named me their tennis coach of the year. In 1990, the State of Michigan High School Association named me the coach of the year. In 1993, the State of Michigan High School Association named me the Tennis Coach of the Year award. And then in 2011, I was inducted into the Sturgis Athletic Hall of Fame. And then 2019, I was inducted into the Constantine Public Schools Hall of Fame. And I want to go back and reiterate that in 1990, and 1993, I was also inducted in the Hall of Fames there as well. Now, 2019 was a bit of a rough year for me. That's the year I stopped driving. I had to retire from Sturgis Public Schools completely. I would have driven bus forever. You know, I miss driving bus. I miss the free food. But mostly I miss the kids and being around those kids. So I stayed on and helped Coach Earl as long as I could. Now in 2017, I lost my second wife, Helen Siebenthal. And we had a good 20 years together. Her first husband, Russell Siebenthal, he's right over here buried. Well, they had these 4 plots. The first one was reserved for Russell, the second one for Helen. The other 2, as far as I was concerned, were up for grabs. And so I said, well, Helen, would it be okay if I'm buried next to you? And she said, well, of course. I'd love to have you buried next to me. Then I asked, well, just so you know, my next wife will be buried next to me. And she said, well, you can be buried next to me, but my next husband will be buried next to you. So, now, my first wife, Lila, now that's the kid's mother. Well, we met at Western Michigan University, and we were married for 35 years. After my 3 kids, like I said, Mike, Mark, and Mary were grown, we decided we wanted to adopt. And so we adopted a little girl named Tina, and we raised her as well. Now, unfortunately, after 35 years of marriage, that one ended in divorce. And then in 2008, my oldest son, Mike, passed away, and he's buried right here, as you can see. Now, my other kids are doing great. At least they were as of 2022 when I passed away. Now, again, July 4th, firecracker baby, and I was patriotic as I was, I requested that Yankee Doodle Dandy be played at my funeral. All the pallbearers had to wear Sturgis Trojan t-shirts. The current girls tennis team at that time arrived by school bus to my funeral. The hearse that took me to Oaklawn Cemetery drove by the tennis courts one last time and paused. A former player of mine, Lisa Fox Kistler, summed my life up like this: game, set, match. It was a life well played. Thank you, Lisa. And thank every one of you for coming by today, and I hope you have a great tour.
Well, good afternoon. I am Paul Casault, and this is my wife, Jean.
Hello, everyone.
We were married on June 24th, 1950 in Eaton Rapids.
That's right. We were high school sweethearts. We both attended Western Michigan University and received teaching degrees. I came to Sturgis to teach kindergarten about a year before we were married.
And in 1950, I was hired as a business education teacher and eventually developed the co-op vocational ed program in Sturgis.
That's right. Our family grew quickly. Soon 4 of our 8 children were born: Christopher, Craig, Chuck, and Kathy. Before we were through, we also had Paul, Michael, John, James, and Kevin.
That's right. Well, our large family did not keep us from being involved in the community, and one of our commitments was the youth center in the basement of the Sturgis-Young Auditorium. When we kept really busy in there. Oh, it was developed by Orley Kribs in 1945.
When the auditorium was set to open in 1955, a youth center in the basement was part of the included plans. And there's multiple photos of that original youth center. And we were able to carry that on for 23 years.
Right. Friday night was for the high school kids, and Saturday night was for junior high students. And the rooms were equipped with some ping pong tables and pool tables, and we had a snack bar. And I think the biggest attraction was the dance floor. And a lot of times we would take our children along when they got big enough to help.
It was so much fun. On Sunday mornings, we were in church. Holy Angels Catholic Church was also the center of our lives.
And off and on between the births of our children, Jean would find herself back in the classroom, usually kindergarten.
That's right. Kindergarten was a half day back then, if you remember. There was one class in the morning, another class came in the afternoon. I generally taught half a day. That way I could be at home in the morning and see our children off to school. And your mother helped out.
Oh, yeah.
That was such a blessing having her in town.
And we had many foreign exchange students in our home over the years. I think 7 or 8. Yeah. When the kids next door lost both their parents, the 2 older sisters worked to keep the home together and the family together for their younger siblings. And so we would often help that family.
That's right. And that's not all you did for the neighbors over the years. Our kids still talk about being outside with you shoveling snow for half of the neighborhood.
Well, I wanted to make sure they could get out. And, well, you should talk. You were always fixing meals for shut-ins or new moms.
It's true. Paul was busy with more jobs than just teaching. I had dinner on the table every night at 5:30. He would eat before heading off to his next job or self-imposed responsibility. He could fix anything, and so he was in great demand.
Well, one of the things I was most proud of was developing the Gap, and that was over on Jefferson Street and West Street, and it was the generational activity program. Well, I wanted to teach the high school students some hospitality skills and meal preparation. So they would come and they would prepare these meals for the senior citizens and then serve them the meals, thus learning their hospitality. And this was their vocational training.
It was a great program. Eventually it became just a senior center, but because of your commitment, it was named the Paul Casault Senior Center. And you earned the 1977 Sturgis Citizen of the Year. It was one of several of Paul's efforts in vocational education. He developed a quality program in Sturgis. Soon, the St. Joseph County Intermediate School District asked him to make vocational education open to all students.
That was one of the jobs I enjoyed probably the most. But unfortunately, in 1981, I had to retire due to health reasons. But that gave me more time to take care of our rental houses and to help the neighbors, and also to remember the past. Like when I met Jean for the first time. I thought she was everything a young fella could ask for, and I was right.
You was.
She was always a wonderful, wonderful girl, and her sense of humor was priceless.
Remember the time when Kathy was a baby and Craig and Chuck were at home too? I was putting something away in the closet,
Oh, yes.
and Chuck, being the toddler, came up behind me and closed the door.
Well, there wasn't a doorknob on the inside,
No,
so
there
she
was
couldn't
not.
get out.
I was stuck. Craig was watching cartoons, so I was talking through the door to Chuck. Go get Craig, go get Craig. He was just a toddler. He couldn't even talk yet. but you would hear him toddle away and say, "Craig, mama, Craig, mama." Craig was so engrossed in the cartoon, and he couldn't understand Chuck anyways. So after a few more tries, I just sat down in the closet, threw my head back, and started laughing. I knew it would all be okay. It was only 10:30 or 11 in the morning. The baby wasn't crying. Craig was engrossed with the TV, and I was talking to Chuck through the door.
Well, she knew that Chris, our oldest, or I would soon be home for lunch, so she just decided to laugh at the situation. I'm not so sure I would have responded as well, but I'm always appreciated that Jean could.
Paul passed away in 1988. It was a very painful time. The year before, we had lost our son James, known as Jamie, in a hunting accident. He was 24 years old. Thank God we had our faith to sustain us. As hard as Paul worked all of those years, I guess it was inevitable that his heart would eventually give out. I retired from the classroom in 1988, but lived for 17 more years. For a while in our original family home, later moved to a smaller place. It was my joy to be able to attend Mass daily. Some days I would volunteer in the classroom. One day a week I would go to Thurston Woods and do the nails of my older friends. We would also play games. Sometimes I would serve birthday cake. I also volunteered for the Red Cross and the Sturgis Hospital. I had no reason to sit at home with so many opportunities to help others. I was totally amazed in 1994 when I was named Sturgis Citizen of the Year. Honors are nice, but raising such wonderful children, enjoying our grandchildren, teaching so many Sturgis children and helping others, those are the things that mattered most to us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you folks for stopping by for a visit. If you really want to enjoy life, help others. You will not be sorry.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Mrs. Hoopingarner, and I am so excited to be your teacher this school year. That's the sort of greeting that I used during the 33 years that I taught. And, well, you all seem to be a lot older than my students, so you may call me Priscilla. I was born in 1931 over in Bronson, Michigan, and grew up there. I graduated with the class of 1950. And in 1952, married Doyle Hoopingarner. We divorced in 1960, but not before my two beautiful children were born, Lisa and Kirk. Also in 1960 is when I earned my bachelor's degree. See, I didn't do that right after high school. And then 2 years later, 1962, I earned my master's. Also in 1960, as you can tell, it was a very busy year. I started my teaching career over at Fawn River School and was able to teach there for 4 years, before coming to Congress Elementary here in Sturgis for the remaining 29. And I love my children, my own and my students. As I was teaching, my goal was to create a welcoming classroom environment, full of learning and enrichment. And every year I would tell the Sturgis students about the school over in Ottawa, because that school over there was a single-room schoolhouse with a stone exterior, which looked a lot different than what the students in Sturgis knew. They also heard that we went to go visit there every year, and were wondering when that was going to happen. So lots of little questions. And every year I would also try to bring as much nature into the classroom as possible. So this environment today is perfect for doing so. We would always get to see the egg turn into the caterpillar and the chrysalis into a beautiful butterfly, and the students always loved it. Now, some of you may know or may have experienced that when you're teaching, there are challenges. And one thing for me was I just couldn't get through to a student. Just a little guy. I kept trying different things and not sure what to do to connect with him. And one day I found him in the corner looking over a National Geographic map, and I realized he liked learning about different cultures. And when that was realized, it just clicked. And you could see it in his eyes, and it's such an amazing feeling to see your students learn and just make those connections with what you're trying to teach them. It is, I don't know if there's a greater feeling in the world for that. And also, if you live long enough, you start receiving awards. I lived to be 90, so a few of them did come. My most precious award was, let's see, it was the 1988 John E. Oster Memorial for Excellence in the Classroom. Now, when I started teaching, I didn't do it for awards. I did it for the students, because I wanted to help them build a good, solid foundation on learning, and I wanted to encourage them to keep learning. And just teaching them was so rewarding. Throughout this whole time, my own kids had their activities. So we had dance class with Miss Madeleine Murphy Parker. We had the band and the stage. So a very busy household. And as I grew up, I started facing an empty nest. So I needed something else to do in my free time. And I turned to something that I've always loved, the great outdoors. And my favorite animal is a turtle. And we have one here today. This is Roscoe. He is a map turtle. He is about 10 to 11 years old, and he likes to explore. He's been all over this place. I also like to try and visit conservation camps in northern Michigan. Oh no, buddy, you can't go that way. Not yet. And these conservation camps made my love of the outdoors even greater. Community service was also important to me. I was a part of 3 honor societies. Not honors, historical. Historical societies are very important. And the Sturgis Kiwanis East Side and the Sturgis Garden Club. I mean, how can you not love this community where there are so many opportunities out here? And in 1993, I retired from teaching, and I had even more free time. So what did I do? I went on Menno bus excursions with my friends, and we went to national parks, and it was so much fun. We met new people along the way, and I can tell you, laughter is the best medicine to staying young. In 2001, I earned the Sturgis Citizen of the Year award, which came as a surprise. But it just touched my heart, because I had taught many of the local leaders. So it was very nice that they were still thinking of me and what I've been able to do for them. And as we all know, all good things must come to an end, as did my good life in 2022. And as you may notice, I am not buried here at Oaklawn Cemetery. As per my wishes, I was cremated, and the memorial service was held out at Camp Fort Hill. That way I could become a part of the world that I have always loved. Thank you for visiting with me today. May you enjoy your life as I have enjoyed mine.
Hello, hello. Hello, folks. My name is George Orley Kribs, but everybody calls me Orley. I was born on June 27th in 1891, right here in Sturgis. And I went off to World War I as a second lieutenant in Company K, 327th Infantry. Now, I returned home in 1919, and I wasted no time marrying the lovely Irene Carver on June 23rd, 1919. Now, we have 2 lovely daughters, Marion and Catherine. Now, I've done quite a few things in my life, but one of the most notable things I'll be remembered for is my dedication and enthusiasm to the Boy Scouts of America here locally in this greater Sturgis area. Now, the Sturgis was kind enough to name a nature conservatory after me. It might as well have been named the Guy Kirsch Nature Center for his participation. Now, Guy and I were both very enthusiastic about the Boy Scouts of America, and we wanted a facility of our own. So we searched around, and in 1928, we found 160 acres available for $4,000 right on Lake Tamarack between Klinger and Thompson Lake. Now, this was the most beautiful, perfect location, and it was rich in Native American lore. It was also referred to as Signal Hill. Now, Guy and I wasted no time going and trying to get the funds for this $4,000 to purchase this property. Now, back then, that was a lot of money. Well, we got pledges for almost half of the $4,000 when C.W. Kirsch, Guy's father, wrote a check for the whole thing. Now, because of my enthusiasm and dedication, I became the first director of Camp Fort Hill. I also established a successful day camp program for the youth in the greater Sturgis area. Now, in 1930, we had Dr. W.B. Hinsdale, an archaeologist from the University of Michigan, come and announced that it was a prehistoric Native American fortification. But we weren't surprised, we already knew that. Now, aside from the outdoors and my work with youth that I really truly did love, I also had another passion. That was music. Now, though there isn't a band named after me, so it's kind of hard to remember all of that, but a long time ago, Sturgis had a lot of bands going on. I was a part of one of them called the Electric City Band. We played at both the 1911 and the 1916 Dam Celebration Parades. Now, in 1926, I formed a 30-piece Boy Scout band and directed the Sea Scouts Orchestra. We would rehearse about once a week and perform at every scouting event, pretty much anywhere they would let us perform. Now, my other passion was the accordion, which my former student and friend of mine allowed me to use my former accordion today. I also taught and directed an accordion band, and we perform all over. Now, have any of you ever been to an accordion concert before? Okay, it's a lot of fun, it's great music, but let me tell you what, it's a workout. So, soon enough, America had entered the Second World War. Now, myself and 7 other World War I veterans from the Newman-Wemsel post decided that we were going to re-enlist. Now, it had been 25 years since we had been in the military. We weren't so young anymore. But that didn't stop us for our love and dedication for our country. Now, while stationed in Italy with the 2nd Corps headquarters, I received the Bronze Star for my work with the Special Forces. For those of you who don't know, the Special Forces is the USO, so I was still able to incorporate music in my fight for freedom. I was discharged from the military after the Second World War as a lieutenant colonel. I did a couple other jobs throughout my life. Like, for example, I had purchased the Sturgis Bottle Works Company. However, I did sell that before I left for the First World War. I'd also had been a shipping clerk for the B.F. Freeland & Sons Company. I lived in Ludington for about a decade to work with the YMCA. I was also an executive for many years on the board for the local Boy Scouts of America. Now, even though I did all those things, I will say the one thing that I am most proud of and passionate about is Camp Fort Hill and all the programs for the youth. So it's a joy to reminisce about my life with you folks today. But I do encourage you, please go and visit Camp Fort Hill. It truly is a natural treasure. And if you can, please volunteer for some of the local youth organizations and help out with those. That would truly honor me the most. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, welcome. My name is Frances Clark, and I was born right here in Sturgis, Michigan in 1905. And when I passed away in 1998, it was my wish to come home to rest. But in the 93 years in between, I spent most of those 93 years sharing the beauty of music with my piano students of every age. Music was my life, and it has been my absolute joy to help children experience and grow in music, because I believe music is in every one of us and in every one of you. I graduated from Sturgis High School in 1923, and you just met one of my classmates, the Hat Lady, Margaret Olmstead. After graduating, I attended Kalamazoo College, and after graduating in 1928, I returned home to Sturgis to teach private piano lessons. And I was here in Sturgis when Phineas Wheat joined the high school staff and led the band program to great heights. My Sturgis piano students were such a delight. If you look at the concert, the recital programs from those years, you would see names that you might recognize. There are the Kirsch children, and the Vogt children, and many others. But after teaching piano lessons here in Sturgis for about 17 years, in 1945 I joined the faculty at Kalamazoo College, where I had graduated from, and I developed the first 4-year program in piano pedagogy that was ever offered at any American college or university. Pedagogy. That's such a beautiful word. It means the method of teaching, both in theory and in practice. So, I begin by making sure, first of all, that the child hears the music. Now, this is not just passive listening. This is active listening, and it's the same with looking at the music notes on the score and touching the keys. All three must develop simultaneously. Hearing, seeing, and touching. All three aspects of learning must go hand in hand. And they can, because our children have music in them. There is always more to see, more to hear, and to feel with music. Following this path of encouraging music teachers and students, after 10 years at Kalamazoo College, I left in 1955 to chair the piano and pedagogy departments at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, New Jersey. 5 years later, in 1960, I established the New School for Music Studied, supported by my former student and colleague now, Louise Goss. The name I proposed, the New School for Music Studied, caused Louise some concern. In 5 years, we won't be new anymore, she said. Well, if it isn't, I don't want anything to do with it, I responded. Just as my students grew in their music, I was always growing in my understanding of music and teaching. At one of my summer workshops, I remember a music teacher questioned something that I presented. But that's not what you told us last year, she said, in confusion. I responded, well, that's not what I thought last year, but I've had a year to learn and grow. Aren't you glad? These things are not written in stone, they're written in music. And music has endless possibilities. My name is probably best remembered because of the more than 80 volumes of the Francis Clark Library for piano students. We developed these over the years, and they are still available for piano students. In 1963, Kalamazoo College conferred on me the honorary Doctor of Music degree. What a lovely honor, like many others that I was also given. So kind and generous. But I did not teach music for honors. I taught piano to my students to pass on the love of music, and I believe that remains. There's now the Francis Clark Center for Piano Pedagogy. It's a not-for-profit educational organization for the advancement of piano teaching, learning, and performing through quality resources and programs. So I feel my 93 years were so blessed by music and passing on the love of it to future generations. I was often asked by teachers, how could they know if they were successful? And I always answered, if your students continue to play music and to explore other kinds of music, if they're part of the musical life in their communities, perhaps in a church choir or a band or some other form of music, if they attend concerts, and if they encourage their own children to study piano, then I think we can say, without any reasonable doubt, that we have been successful teachers. Remember, there is music in all of us, so keep seeing, hearing, and touching the music. And have a musical day. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Hello there. Margaret Olmstead.
Margaret,
Came to meet you.
I always have such a hard time deciding what I want to wear. A lot of people say they can't picture me wearing this, but I think it is wonderful that they chose to honor people who dedicated their lives to children and to young adults. I'm a little uncomfortable about being here. I had to ask, why me? After all, I'm pretty much known for my 35 years with the Laura Lewis Hat Shop. My husband Laverne and I we didn't have any children of our own, but we were blessed with many that came into our lives through the shop, through the neighborhood, through relatives, and also the decades I taught Sunday school at the First United Methodist Church. I was born on Saturday, July 15th, 1905. My father, John Yunker, and my mother, Anna Hauser, they christened me Margaret Alice. And before I even had a chance to form memories of my mother, she passed from tuberculosis when I was 2 years old. Father married again, and I was delighted when I was 7 years old, my baby brother Robert came into the family. I graduated from Sturgis High School in 1923. And after that, I ended up going to live in Parkville, Michigan to take a teaching job at Center Park School. My grandparents lived up there. But then on June 2nd, 1925, a month and 2 weeks before my 20th birthday, I was joined in holy matrimony to Laverne Olmstead, thus ending my 2-year teaching career. I took a job for just a short time at a grocery store, the National Tea Company. Then I started to work for C.W. Tribbett. And I discovered I loved retail. I flourished there. But there was this maiden lady in Sturgis named Laura Lewis. And in 1924, a year after I graduated and a year before I married Laverne, she purchased a hat shop. And she ran it for 9 years, operated it. And then she went and married Herbert Elliott, a veterinarian. He was a doctor from Orland, Indiana. He gave her 2 years to decide what she was going to do with the hat shop. So in 1935, she invited me to join her and go to Chicago. And we went up to the 7th floor of this big building to go to the Parker House to choose the spring fashions for the store that year. Well, on March 3rd, 1935, I started as the manager of the Laura Lewis Hat Shop for $14 a week. Laura worked with me that first day, and I was pretty much on my own. She came in occasionally on weekends. And then the next year we did hire Hazel Corning and to work at the store, and she stayed with her for 34 years. In 43, I was made co-owner with Laura of the store, and then in 63, Laura passed on. And when she did, her stepson Ralph inherited the building. And my new partner became Laverne. He and I shared the business together, and we leased it from Ralph, the building from Ralph. But then on January 1st, 1970, we decided it was time to retire. So we sold the business to Ralph. And he operated it for 4 years before he was transferred with Federal Mogul to another state. And he sold the building to the Welty Music Company. Okay, well, that's the history. But now, may I tell you about the heart of it? It was not about owning a business, and it wasn't about the sales. It wasn't, we never pressured anybody into buying anything. It was about the people, the souls, the young girls that would come uptown and wander into the store. I'd let them just try on hats to their heart's content. I wanted them to shine. And if I got an opportunity to really get to know one of them well, and I knew they didn't go to church, I'd invite them to join me for church. And it seemed like every spring, the ladies wanted a new bonnet to wear to church for Resurrection Sunday. And they'd come in with their daughters. Fair was another big time to get a new hat to be able to shine. And if a woman came in and she couldn't really afford a new hat, she could bring in one of her past hats. I had a refurbishing business. We could add a ribbon or, a feather, or maybe even a veil. I want her to feel good about what she had on when she left the store. Now, my niece, my brother Robert had a couple daughters, Lois and Mary. And Mary shared with me when she was older that she remembers coming into my home and seeing these envelopes all around the house on the back of them with names written on them. And she'd see them on my nightstands. And I said, that's my prayer list. If somebody came into the store and I knew they had a concern, either like with their kids or finances, or if I knew they didn't know and they needed the Lord, they didn't know Jesus, I added them to my prayer list. But things changed. Can you believe in 1880, St. Joseph County had 26 millinery places, hat shops. There were 6 of them in 3 Rivers. White Pigeon, Sturgis, and Little Mendon each had 4. Centerville, Constantine, and Colon had 2. And Leonidas and Little Parkville, where I worked, each had 1. But by 1955, I was the only one left. You could say I had a monopoly on the business. Other things that changed too were in the 30s. Used to have head covering requirements for church. Well, that went away. And then hairstyles. How can you show off that beautiful hairstyle when you're wearing a hat? So it was time. And when I reflected back on Laverne's and my life, I knew our purpose was to be a friend to all and to serve God in our life. And my biggest dedication was to Jesus and to all God's children, no matter what age they were. So thank you for joining me here in the cemetery. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Phineas Wheat, car salesman here. What, are you surprised? Perhaps you're more familiar with my illustrious career in the Sturgis schools as the band and music director. Now that's not why I came to town. I arrived in Sturgis in January of 1927 as a car dealer at 113 North Street. With me was my lovely wife Eva and our 2 young sons, Alan and Phineas. Car sales was my livelihood, but my real love was music. The Great Depression pushed me into a much better career. Car sales came to a screeching halt in 1930, so I applied to Sturgis High School as the new band and music teacher. I started off with 14 students, and over time that number grew to nearly 100. Drums were my instrument. However, I could play and teach any instrument, including piano. However, I was not as good as my friend Francis Clark over there. Perhaps I should back up a bit. I tend to jump into whatever I'm doing with both feet, as they say, so I'll start with my beginnings. I was born December 23rd, 1897 in Springfield, Massachusetts to Ada and Alan Wheat. My parents were very supportive of my love of music. I graduated from Kalamazoo College, and on March 25th, 1920, I married Eva. Eva was also very supportive of my music career, and she often chaperoned band trips, and she helped the music program in hundreds of other ways. Now, as you can see, she's laid to rest next to me. She actually passed away in 2000. However, there was no family permission to be given to engrave and have that changed to reflect her actual death date. Some of you may know her as a math teacher, as she was a teacher at Sturgis High School, and a lot of people loved her, and she was very influential in shaping the youth of Sturgis as well. Now, jumping back, in November of that year, when I became the band teacher, we showcased the high school chorus, glee club, the girls' glee club, the band, and elementary choruses from Congress and 4th Street schools. Early the next year, we founded the Sturgis Girls Drum Corps, and they were fantastic, and they started from nothing and became very, very popular. In 1931, I proposed a new school song that I had written. Maybe you've heard of it, and if you're lucky, I might just sing you a little bit at the end, and you're welcome to join in if you know the song. In 1932, with the generous support of the Sturgis Retail Merchants Association, the Sturgis High School received brand new uniforms, and we were very proud of them. Because of those uniforms, we were able to perform in a competition at the St. Joseph County Grange Fair in Centerville, and who should happen to be there as a judge but Joseph E. Maddie, who is a professor at the University of Michigan. Now, Professor Maddie said that our group of high school students was some of the best he'd ever seen in his national experience in band competition. Soon we formed the Band Mothers Club, and they were instrumental in helping our music program soar over the next few years. We started competing in local and national competition, usually placing first in the Class B division. Now, World War II started to slow things down for the entire nation, but in 1944 we presented the band bust, and the junior and senior bands both took part in that, and that lived on for many, many years. Now, just like the war, my health slowed me down. In March of 1946, the Sturgis Band placed first in a competition. However, one of my students, who was a senior student conductor, led the band as I had had a heart attack 2 weeks earlier. Eventually, a new head of music was named. Now, my health let me down in August of 1950 for the final time, but the music in our Sturgis community still continues today. Now, some of you may have some motto that you go by. Mine was, do right by everyone. Go to music concerts and encourage young musicians. And of course, rah, 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 Sturgis to you will be true. Now, I'm going to sing a little bit of the fight song for you, and you're welcome and encouraged to join in with me. Does that sound okay? All right, so I'll give you the roll-off. Dut, 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 dut. Sturgis High School, we are for you. To our school will always be true. The teams are on the field to fight. We'll yell with all our might. Rah, rah, rah. Sturgis to you will be true. Whether we win or lose, we'll win. So get in the fray and we'll win today. Sturgis High School, we love you. All right, thank you for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your tour.
Well, good afternoon.
Bye, Mr. Snow.
My name is Mr. Snow. My full name is Robert Emmett Snow. The only one that ever called me Robert was my mom, of course, and it was Robert Emmett when I was really in trouble, you know what I mean? My friends all called me Bob. And what's interesting is the movie What About Bob was produced in the same year that I died. But it wasn't about me, of course. And all my students called me Mr. Snow, because you had to say Mr. Snow back then. It was very important. And you know, it was pretty appropriate, don't you think? Well, I'm a teacher, so today you're going to be my class. So when I ask a question, you need to answer the question, or I may have to call on one of you. Okay, oh, some of you having bad memories of school already. Here's your first question. So I was born in November 1901, and I died in September 1991. How old was I when I died?
89.
89, very good, thank you. Yes, 89. Some say 90, but I didn't quite make it to 90. So that's very good. Well, you know what they told me? They told me I had to talk to you and share 89 years of memory in 5 minutes. Do you think that's possible? Mathematically impossible, isn't it? But I could tell you some things. I could tell you about how I was born in 1901 in Illinois, and I grew up on a farm, and in the early 1900s farming is a lot different than what it is now. And then I could tell you, well, how did a farm boy, a country bumpkin like you, ever go to college and get a bachelor's degree? I could tell you about that. And then I even got a master's degree. Can you imagine a farm boy doing that? Or when I became a teacher, I can tell you how I started in Illinois, then I went all the way to Texas, then I came back here to Howe Military. How did that happen? So I can tell you about that. Or I could tell you something else that maybe you didn't even know. When I was at Howe Military, for 5 years, I played semi-pro football. You know where? Sturgis, Michigan. Did you know that? It's called the Sturgis Wildcats, and we were kind of Wildcats on the field, and I loved playing. Sometimes I would play both offense and defense, and some of you, maybe you wouldn't like it so much, but maybe what you would like is a little bit of romance. So I was getting older now. I was 30, 31, and I thought, you know, maybe I want to start looking for a wife. So I started, and I found a wonderful woman, Vivian Burns, and I just thought she was really special, and we started, as we called it back then, courting, you know. And so we started courting, And then eventually I asked her to be my wife, and she married me. 33 years old. And she'd been married before. She had 2 children. So now there were 4 of us, just like bang, instant family. And she really helped me settle down, to be honest with you. Well, I could tell you about all those things. I could even tell you, we could talk about my hobbies. Do any of you like rock collecting? Do any of you like jazz music? Any of you like ice fishing? What about golf? Well, you know what's nice about being a teacher is because in the summertime, you had the whole summer off, and I could golf every day of the week. I could golf sometimes 6 days a week, every day except for Sunday. And that was really special as well. But what I really want to talk to you about is my career teaching here at the Sturgis High School. I just loved it there. I came in 1939 and I loved the students. And did any of you have me for a teacher? You have me for a teacher? Well, I don't quite remember. You have to maybe talk afterwards and bring me up to date on that. And did any of your parents have me as a teacher? And grandparents? Sometimes I would teach 3 generations of students. And it was very interesting to do that. So how many of you graduated from Sturgis High School? Any of you? Okay, let's say it together. Go Trojans. Okay, you ready? Go Trojans. Oh, you can do better than that. Try it one more time. Go Trojans. Oh, that's much better. And so I began my teaching, and I loved the school. I loved the students. I loved the community. It was great. Greatest thing that happened in my life, except for Mary who did in the chorus. And I was sitting in the teacher's lounge. And can you imagine this? Can you believe that sometimes teachers sit in the lounge and talk about students? They do. And one day the teachers in there griping about the students that were bad, you know, causing problems in the class and all. And so I started to think about it, being a mathematician. I thought, I'm going to take an educated guess here. I wonder how many of the students are not good students and how many of them are. And here's what I came up with. I think that most of the problems in the school are caused by 5% of the students. That's all. So here's your next question. Suppose we bring 100 students from Sturgis High School and we put them right here. How many of them are troublemakers? 5. Hey, good math students. And how many of them are not? 95. You do well on percentages. I'm very impressed. Some of my other groups are not quite that good in their math. So now let's think about it. In my class, if you got a 95%, you know what grade you got? You got an A. What's A? A is excellent. Why focus on all the 5% and grumble about them when you can look at the 95% and say, wow, these students are great, because that's what the students at Sturgis really were. So now I have another question for you. How many of you like math? Or let's put it the other way. How many of you don't like math? All the rest of you like math? Oh, no? Okay. Well, I didn't understand about this because I love math and math was easy for me, and I started teaching, and there were some students like you who just didn't seem to get math very much. So I started setting some goals as a teacher. I wanted to make math interesting, fun, and easy to understand. Those are big challenges, aren't they? So I would do some interesting things in class. I would write on the board behind my back as I could write equations, quadratic equations, and put them up on the board. And as I was looking at the class, the students thought that was really cool. I kind of thought it was cool too, kind of fun. It took a while, but you could do it if you wanted to. And the students all thought it was that way. But you know what I didn't tell them? When I was writing on the board like this, I could look at them all right in the eye, and I could see if they were goofing off or whatever. What happened if I turned my back? You know what happens, because you were in school. Teachers don't have eyes in the back of their head. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but they don't have eyes in the back of their head. And so I did it that way. And then for students like those of you who have a little hard time learning, I would try to think of ways to make it really interesting to understand math. Sometimes I'd stay awake at night, to be honest with you, studying the ways to figure out how to make it interesting. So if a student was sitting in class and they were sitting there like saying, huh? You could tell it in their eyes even if they didn't say it, you know what I mean? I thought, how can I do that? And so I'd go home and I would try to figure out ways to go ahead and make it more interesting. Come back the next day and the student was saying, huh? I'd explain it in a new way, and I would say, new way and explain it to them, and you can see the change in their face. It's like, ah, I get it. It's one of those aha moments. I understand. And you know, aha moments for teachers, well, I would put it this way, it just turned my crank. Well, you don't know that expression? Well, let me see. If I recall correctly, my first car was a Model T. And did Model Ts have electric starters on like you have now? No, they had what we call a crank. And we weren't talking about a teacher that you didn't like either, right? We were talking about a handle, and you had to crank it over like this. And it would come to life and take off, and I'd run around and jump in the driver's seat and put it in gear, go down the road, lickety-split, going like 60. That was the life. Wind blowing in your face, all that. It was exciting. Sure beat riding behind a stinky horse, I'll tell you that. And that's what would happen, and that's exactly what teaching did for me. It just got me excited. I loved it, and I wanted to go back again and again and again and teach more and help more students to learn. Well, I taught until 1969, and then I decided to retire. But you know what? I couldn't stay out of the classroom. I had to go back, and so I went back as a substitute teacher. And I kept on teaching. I would walk in the classrooms, you know what students would say? Oh, it's a snow day. Now, I don't know if they were talking about my hair. I don't know if they were talking about my name. I don't know if they were talking about, I might give them a snow job, or whether, you know, whether it would be like a snow day in the wintertime when you could just goof off and have fun. It didn't matter. I could tell that they didn't mean it badly. Well, something happened in 1989 that was a real privilege and a real honor and humbling as well. I was named one of the Citizens of the Year right here in Sturgis. You know, that was great. But I want you to know a secret. You know, it wasn't anything close to when the student would come up to me after class and say, Mr. Snow, now I understand. But Mr. Snow, math is even fun. Oh, man. That just does so much for your heart, and you just want to say, yes! Well, so I taught actually as a substitute teacher until I was, you know how old? 88 years old. I taught for 68 years of my life. And then I decided I shouldn't do it anymore. It was just 1 year later that I died. Interesting, I died right at the beginning of the school year. You know, maybe I just couldn't live without teaching. And then you can look all over the cemetery if you want, and you won't find a tombstone with my name on it. You know why? Because they cremated me. And I don't know what my family did with the ashes. I mean, after all, I was dead, right? So I don't know what they did to my ashes. But you know what I hope? I hope they sprinkled some of my ashes right over at the Sturgis High School, because that's where my heart was. Thank you for walking down memory lane with me.
Thank you.
So that concludes today's journey through history here at Oak Lawn Cemetery in Sturgis, Michigan. This program today was put on by the Sturgis Historical Society. Great group of people. They put on this annual program to raise money for the Historical Society to preserve history. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, cemeteries are great places. They are filled with history. All kinds of stories lie beneath these grounds. So I hope you enjoyed today's journey. If you did, please take a minute to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and of course share this video with others so more people can get excited about local history. Thanks for watching.